I ran away from my son's house at dawn. What his wife planned scared me. Dorothy clutched the grey coat to her chest and took one last look at the house where she had lived for the past 2 years. Her hands trembled as she carried the small suitcase she had managed to pack in silence. It was 3:30 in the morning, and she needed to leave before Ashley woke up. What she had overheard in her daughter-in-law's phone call hours earlier still echoed in her mind like a nightmare. The cold, calculated words Ashley had spoken, on the phone to someone Dorothy couldn't identify, had chilled her to the bone. The discovery that her own daughter-in-law planned to put her in a nursing home without her son Michael's knowledge had shattered something inside her heart. Dorothy Wilson, at 72, never imagined she would one day have to flee her own son's home. Her grey hair was disheveled from nerves, and her blue eyes, which had seen so many storms in life, now reflected deep fear. She had lost her husband 3 years ago and had since lived with Michael and Ashley, believing she was safe within the family. The wool coat she wore had been a gift from Michael last Christmas. She held it tightly against her body like a protective shield as she walked through the deserted streets of the Upper East Side in New York City. Every step ached in her tired legs, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the agony in her chest. Ashley had been so convincing all these months, always smiling, always helpful, always pretending to care. But Dorothy had noticed the impatient glances, the subtle comments about the difficulty of caring for an elderly person, the whispered conversations that stopped when she entered the room. In the conversation she had overheard, Ashley talked about how she had found a suitable place for Dorothy, far enough that Michael couldn't visit often. She spoke about the documents she had already arranged and how she would convince Michael it was the best option for everyone. The cold tone in her voice as she planned to discard her mother-in-law like an unwanted object had made Dorothy feel sick. The street was silent, only the sound of her footsteps echoing on the damp pavement. Dorothy had nowhere to go. Her sister, Margaret, lived in Long Island, but she didn't have money for the bus fare. Her few friends her age had scattered across the city or had already passed away. The feeling of abandonment was overwhelming. She stopped under a streetlight and opened her wallet with shaking hands. $32. That was all she had in the world. Michael had always managed her finances since she became a widow, and Ashley had kindly offered to help with her personal expenses. Now Dorothy realized it had been a strategy to keep her dependent and without the means to escape. Tears began to stream down her wrinkled face. They weren't just tears of sadness, but of anger. How had she been so naive? How had she missed the signs? Michael worked so much at his accounting firm that he barely had time to talk to her, and Ashley had become her main companion. A companion who, she now realized, was eager to get rid of her. Dorothy remembered how Ashley always praised the nursing homes she saw on TV, commenting on how the elderly seemed happy and well cared for. She recalled the times Ashley mentioned how liberating it would be for Michael not to worry so much about his mother. All the signs had been there, but she had chosen to ignore them because she wanted to believe she was loved and welcome. The cold dawn air began to seep into her bones. Dorothy had never felt so vulnerable and alone. At 72 years old, she had raised 3 children, worked as a seamstress for 40 years, cared for her sick husband for 2 years before losing him, and now found herself walking the streets like a fugitive. She thought about going back to confront Ashley, but knew it would be pointless. Ashley was young, articulate, and had become very skilled at manipulating situations to always appear as either the victim or the savior. Dorothy was certain that, if she returned, Ashley would find a way to convince Michael that his mother-in-law was becoming paranoid and really needed specialized care. The sound of an approaching car made Dorothy hide behind a tree. Her heart raced at the thought that it might be Michael or Ashley looking for her. But it was just a taxi returning home after a late-night fare. When the car passed, she breathed a sigh of relief, but realized she couldn't stay out on the street for too long. Dorothy started walking toward the nearest bus stop. Maybe she could sit on the bench and wait for dawn. Perhaps a bus heading to Long Island would pass by, and the driver would take pity on an elderly woman and let her ride without paying the full fare. It was a slim hope, but it was all she had. As she walked, memories of the past few months began to rearrange themselves in her mind. Now she saw everything clearly. Ashley always made excuses, so Michael wouldn't spend too much time talking with his mother. She always interrupted their conversations with some household emergency or urgent commitment. She would suggest that Dorothy was tired and needed rest whenever father and son started growing closer. Ashley had also begun making comments to Michael about Dorothy's failing memory, inventing situations where her mother-in-law supposedly forgot something important or mixed up dates. Dorothy realized it was all a strategy to plant the idea in Michael's mind that his mother was losing her mental faculties and needed special care. The bus stop was empty and cold. Dorothy sat on the plastic bench and pulled her coat tighter around her body. The sky was beginning to brighten faintly on the horizon, signaling that the city would wake in a few hours. She needed to decide what to do. Her first option was to try to reach Long Island to stay with Margaret, her younger sister, by 2 years. But Margaret lived with her daughter and son-in-law, and Dorothy wasn't sure she'd be welcome there. Besides, she wasn't certain Margaret would believe her story about Ashley. The second option was to look for a church or community center that could help her temporarily. But Dorothy had too much pride to present herself as a homeless woman, even if that was exactly what she was becoming. The third option was to go back home and try to talk to Michael, but she knew Ashley was very persuasive, and Michael, tired and stressed from work, would likely listen to his wife rather than believe his paranoid mother. A black cat appeared from somewhere and approached Dorothy, meowing softly. She reached out her hand and the animal let itself be petted. The presence of the creature brought her a small comfort in her despair. It was as if even a stray cat understood her loneliness and wanted to offer companionship. "You don't have a home either, do you, little one?" Dorothy whispered, feeling tears well up in her eyes again. "At least you're free to go wherever you want." The first bus of the day passed the stop, but didn't halt because no one was waiting on the correct side. Dorothy realized she didn't even know how to take a bus alone. For years, Michael or Ashley had accompanied her wherever she needed to go. The dependence they had created was greater than she'd imagined. When the sky grew brighter, Dorothy saw a few people beginning to appear on the streets. Bakers opening their shops, news vendors setting up their stands, workers heading to their first shift. Normal life going on while hers had shattered overnight. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like, and especially, subscribe to the channel. It really helps those of us just starting out. Now continuing. A middle-aged woman passed by the bus stop and looked at Dorothy with curiosity. It was obvious that a well-dressed elderly woman sitting alone at a bus stop at 6 in the morning was unusual. Dorothy averted her gaze, afraid. The woman might ask questions, or worse, know Michael and Ashley, and tell them she'd seen her there. Dorothy's stomach growled. She hadn't eaten anything since dinner the night before, and the tension was making her even weaker. With the $32 she had, maybe she could buy bread and coffee, but that would mean even less money for anything else. She decided to save it and endure the hunger for now. After all, she didn't know how long she'd need to survive on that amount. The feeling of helplessness was devastating. Dorothy remembered when she was young and independent, making her own decisions and relying on no one. Old age had brought limitations she never expected. A bus bound for Long Island stopped at the station. Dorothy quickly stood up, but when she saw the fare on the sign, her heart sank. $38. She didn't even have enough to reach her sister. The driver looked at her impatiently, waiting for her to board or step aside. "Sorry," Dorothy said, moving away from the bus. The vehicle drove off with an engine noise that seemed to mock her situation. At that moment, Dorothy felt she had hit rock bottom. No money, no home, no family to trust. She was truly helpless. The tears came back in full force and she could no longer hold them back. That's when a soft voice spoke behind her. "Are you okay?" Dorothy turned and saw a young woman, maybe 30, in a hospital uniform with a genuinely concerned expression. Her dark hair was tied in a bun, and she carried a worn canvas bag. I'm... Dorothy tried to answer, but the words got lost between sobs. "My name is Jennifer. I'm a nurse. You seem like you need help. Did something happen?" The kindness in Jennifer's voice touched Dorothy deeply. It had been so long since someone showed genuine concern for her that she had almost forgotten how it felt. "I have nowhere to go," Dorothy managed to say through her tears. Jennifer looked around and then sat on the bench beside Dorothy. She showed no hurry or impatience, just a sincere willingness to help. "Do you want to tell me what happened? Sometimes talking to a stranger is easier than you'd think." Dorothy hesitated. Her whole life, she'd been taught to keep family problems private, not to air dirty laundry in public. But her situation was desperate, and Jennifer seemed like someone she could trust. "I lived with my son and daughter-in-law," Dorothy began slowly. "Last night I found out she's planning to put me in a nursing home without my son knowing. I overheard her on the phone, arranging everything behind my back." Jennifer nodded, showing no shock or disbelief. As a healthcare professional, she'd probably seen similar situations before. "So you left because of that?" "I didn't know what to do. If I confronted her, I'm sure she'd find a way to make me seem crazy or paranoid. She's very smart and manipulative. My son works too much and trusts her completely." "Do you have other children? Other family?" "I have a sister in Long Island, but I don't know if I can count on her. And I don't even have money for the bus fare." Jennifer grew thoughtful for a moment. Dorothy could see in the young woman's eyes that she was genuinely considering ways to help. "Look, I work at Mercy Hospital, just nearby. My shift just ended and I was heading home, but if you'd like, I can take you there. Maybe the social worker can talk to you and see what kind of help is available." Jennifer's offer felt like a ray of hope to Dorothy. Finally, someone who wasn't judging, her who didn't automatically assume she was confused or exaggerating. "You'd do that for me? You don't even know me." "My grandmother went through something similar a few years ago," Jennifer said with a sad smile. "Unfortunately, no one helped her back then. Maybe I can do for someone what I wish had been done for her." Dorothy felt an overwhelming gratitude fill her chest. After hours of despair and loneliness, she had finally found someone willing to help without expecting anything in return. "How can I ever thank you?" "No need to thank me. Come on, let's go to the hospital. The breakfast there isn't anything special, but at least you can eat something while we talk to the social worker." Jennifer helped Dorothy to her feet and carried her small bag. As they walked through the streets of the Upper East Side toward the hospital, Dorothy began to feel that maybe there was still kindness in the world. Maybe her situation wasn't as hopeless as it had seemed just hours before. The hospital was an old, but well-kept building. Jennifer knew all the staff and greeted several colleagues as she guided Dorothy through the halls. The sense of being in a place where Jennifer was respected and liked made Dorothy feel a little safer. "Jennifer," a voice called out. It was a middle-aged woman with graying hair and a warm smile. "Shouldn't you be home resting?" "Hi, Dr. Barbara. This is Mrs. Dorothy. She's going through a tough time, and I thought maybe you could talk to her." Dr. Barbara looked at Dorothy with professional attention, but also with compassion. Dorothy could tell she was being assessed, but not in a judgmental way. "Of course. Let's go to my office? Mrs. Dorothy, right? Would you like some coffee before we talk?" The kindness of these two women was making Dorothy emotional again. After months of enduring Ashley's impatient glances and Michael's growing indifference, being treated with respect and care felt almost unreal. In Dr. Barbara's office, the hospital's social worker, Dorothy repeated her story. This time she managed to share more details, including the signs she had ignored for months and the specific phone call that had made her flee her home. "Mrs. Dorothy, unfortunately, this kind of situation is more common than we'd like. Often, well-meaning family members make decisions about seniors without consulting them properly. Other times, like in your case, people see the elderly as a burden and look for ways to get rid of the responsibility. But what can I do? I have nowhere to go, no money, and if I go back home, I'm sure Ashley will convince my son that I really do need to be put in a home. First, let's arrange a safe place for you to stay temporarily. We partner with a shelter that takes in seniors in vulnerable situations. It's not a nursing home, it's more like a family-run boarding house, where you can stay while we sort things out." The word nursing home still made Dorothy shudder, but the way Dr. Barbara described the shelter sounded nothing like what Ashley had planned for her. "Second, We'll try to get in touch with your son. It's important that he knows you're okay and understands what's happening at home. But what if he doesn't believe me? That's why we're going to do things the right way. We'll document everything, talk to qualified people, and make sure your rights are respected. You can't be hospitalized against your will without a proper medical evaluation and your consent. Dorothy felt immense relief hearing those words. All night she had felt completely powerless, as if Ashley had total control over her fate. Now she was learning there were laws and people willing to protect her. One important thing, Mrs. Dorothy. Do you have all your documents with you? ID, Social Security card, health insurance card. Dorothy searched her purse and found the papers. At least Ashley hadn't managed to take those yet, she thought with a pang of bitterness. Great. I'll call Harmony House and see if they have a spot available. Meanwhile, Jennifer can help you freshen up and get something proper to eat. Jennifer, who had stayed quiet during the conversation, immediately offered to help. Dorothy realized the young nurse was becoming something of a guardian angel in her life. A few hours later, Dorothy was settled in a simple but clean, cozy room at Harmony House. It was a large home in the West Village, run by Mrs. Ruth, a 65-year-old woman who had turned her house into a refuge for seniors in difficult situations. This isn't a nursing home, Mrs. Ruth explained as she showed Dorothy around. It's a place where people our age can stay temporarily while they sort out their problems. Some stay a few days, others stay months. It depends on each situation. The atmosphere was truly welcoming. There was a common room where some seniors watched TV, a shared kitchen where residents could prepare their own meals if they wanted, and a small backyard garden where they could sit and relax. How many people live here? Dorothy asked. Right now we have 8 residents, including you, each with their own story, their own struggles. But here, they're treated with respect and dignity. No one is forced to do anything they don't want, and everyone has a say in decisions about the house. Dorothy was introduced to the other residents at lunch. There was Mr. Richard, 78, who was there because his children were fighting in court over who should care for him. Mrs. Betty, 82, who had left her daughter's home after discovering her son-in-law was stealing from her pension. Mr. Robert, 75, who was recovering from depression after losing his wife and learning his daughter-in-law didn't want him living in the home he'd shared with his spouse for 40 years. Each story was different, but they all had one thing in common. These were people who had been devalued or mistreated by family and were trying to rebuild their lives. The difference here, Mrs. Betty explained to Dorothy during lunch, is that we're treated as capable adults who can make our own decisions. No one decides for us what's best for our lives. Those words resonated deeply in Dorothy's heart. Over the past few months, Ashley had taken more and more control over aspects of her life, always under the excuse of helping or making things easier for her. That afternoon, Dr. Barbara called Harmony House. She had spoken to Michael at work and scheduled a meeting for the next day at the hospital. Michael had been extremely worried to hear his mother had disappeared from home and was staying at a shelter. How did he react when you told him about Ashley's plans? Dorothy asked anxiously. He was surprised and said he didn't know anything about a nursing home. He asked to speak directly with you and wants to understand what really happened. Dorothy felt a mix of relief and nervousness. On one hand, she was happy that Michael wanted to hear her side. On the other, she was worried about how Ashley had reacted upon discovering she had run away, and that Michael now knew something. That night, Dorothy barely slept. She kept imagining how the meeting with Michael would go, what Ashley might have told him, and whether she could convince him that her version of events was true. The next morning, Jennifer showed up at Harmony House to accompany Dorothy to the hospital. The young nurse had become a true friend in just 2 days, and her presence gave Dorothy the courage to face the conversation with her son. Remember, you have a right to a say in your own life, Jennifer said as they walked. Don't let anyone decide for you what's best for you. Michael was in Dr. Barbara's office when they arrived. Dorothy's heart tightened at the sight of her son. He looked tired and worried, with dark circles under his eyes and a wrinkled suit. At 45, Michael had always been a man dedicated to his work, but in recent weeks, he seemed even more stressed than usual. Mom, he stood up immediately and hugged her. I was desperate. Why did you leave the house without saying anything? Ashley woke up and saw you weren't in your room. We called the police, the hospitals." Dorothy felt a pang of guilt, seeing Michael's genuine distress, but she quickly reminded herself that he knew nothing about Ashley's plans. "Michael, I needed to talk to you about some things I found out about Ashley," Dorothy said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Ashley told me you've been a bit confused lately, forgetting things, getting lost in your own home. She was worried and wanted to talk to me about getting you medical help." Dr. Barbara gently intervened. "Michael, your mother has shared some important things with us. Why don't we let her explain everything before jumping to conclusions?" And so, Dorothy told him. She told him about the phone call she'd overheard, about Ashley's subtle comments about nursing homes, about how she felt increasingly isolated in her own home. She told him about the documents Ashley had mentioned on the phone and how her daughter-in-law always found excuses to interrupt conversations between mother and son. Michael listened in silence, but Dorothy could see from his face that he was struggling to believe what he was hearing. "Mom, I know you and Ashley sometimes have small disagreements. Two women in the same house, it's normal, but Ashley has always been very attentive to you. She takes care of the house, takes care of you, helps me with everything." "Exactly, Michael," Dorothy said, feeling frustration rise. "She takes care of everything, including making decisions about my life without consulting me. But, Mom, Ashley never mentioned anything about a nursing home to me. If she were planning this, I'd know, wouldn't I?" Dr. Barbara spoke up again. "Michael, unfortunately, it's very common for family members to make decisions about seniors without involving others. Sometimes it's with good intentions, other times for different reasons. What matters is that your mother felt threatened enough to leave home in the middle of the night. That alone suggests something is wrong." Jennifer, who had been quiet until then, also spoke. "Michael, I've worked in healthcare for 8 years and have seen many similar cases. People who seem very helpful and caring in public, but have different motivations in private." Michael ran a hand through his hair, visibly disturbed. Dorothy could see he was trying to process information that completely contradicted his image of his wife. "I don't know what to think," admitted Michael. "Ashley always seemed so devoted to the family. She takes care of the house, looks after her mother, never complained about anything. Son, I understand it's hard to believe, but I heard her conversation. She was talking about documents, about the place she had chosen, about how to convince you it would be better for everyone. Are you sure you heard correctly? Couldn't it have been about something else?" Michael's question hurt Dorothy more than she expected. Her son was essentially questioning her mental state, exactly what she had feared would happen. "Michael," Dr. Barbara said firmly, "your mother shows no signs of confusion or cognitive issues. She's a lucid person who made a difficult decision based on what she experienced and heard. So what do you suggest I do? Go home and accuse my wife of plotting against my mother? We suggest you have an honest conversation with your wife about plans for your mother's future," Dr. Barbara replied, "and that this conversation happens with your mother present so she can be part of decisions about her own life." Michael was silent for several minutes, clearly torn between loyalty to his wife and concern for his mother. "All right," he finally said, "I'll talk to Ashley tonight, and tomorrow the three of us will meet to clear this up." Dorothy felt partial relief. At least Michael was willing to look into the situation, but she also grew increasingly anxious about how Ashley would react upon learning her plans had been uncovered. When Michael left the hospital, Jennifer walked Dorothy back to Harmony House. Along the way, they talked about the meeting. "Do you think he believed me?" "I think he's confused and needs time to process everything," Jennifer replied. "But the important thing is he's willing to talk. That's already a big step." Back at Harmony House, Dorothy was greeted by other residents, eager to hear how the meeting with her son had gone. Mrs. Betty was especially attentive. "How did it go, dear? Did he believe your story?" "I'm still not sure. He's going to talk to his wife, and tomorrow we'll meet again." "What matters is you told the truth," Mr. Richards said. "Now let the facts speak for themselves." But Dorothy was restless. She knew Ashley well enough to realize she wouldn't stay passive after discovering her plans had been exposed. She was surely already crafting a defense, and likely an attack on Dorothy's credibility. During dinner at Harmony House, Dorothy barely ate, Her mind raced, trying to anticipate the arguments Ashley would use against her. "Mrs. Dorothy, you need to eat something," Mrs. Ruth said, noticing she was just pushing food around her plate. "I've lost my appetite. I can't stop thinking about what's going to happen tomorrow." "Listen, I've seen many situations like yours," Mrs. Ruth said, sitting beside Dorothy. "And one thing I've learned, the truth always comes out. It may take time, it may be painful, but the truth always surfaces." That night, Dorothy struggled to sleep. She kept imagining the conversation between Michael and Ashley, trying to guess what strategy her daughter-in-law would use to defend herself. The next morning, Jennifer called Harmony House early. "Mrs. Dorothy, Michael called the hospital asking to reschedule the meeting. He said he needs another day to talk with his wife." Dorothy's stomach sank. This wasn't a good sign. If Michael needed more time, it meant Ashley had managed to confuse him or convince him that Dorothy was imagining things. Did he say anything else? Only that the situation was more complicated than he thought, and that he needed more time to understand everything. The day dragged on slowly for Dorothy. She tried to distract herself by talking to the other residents at the house, helping in the kitchen, reading magazines in the common room, but her mind kept wandering back to what was happening at Michael and Ashley's place. In the afternoon, Mrs. Ruth got a call. It was Michael, asking if he could visit his mother at Harmony House. Mrs. Ruth agreed, but warned that Dorothy had the right to refuse the visit if she didn't feel ready. "I want to see him," Dorothy said. "I need to know what happened." Michael arrived at Harmony House late in the afternoon. Dorothy could see from his face that he was upset and tired. They sat in the backyard garden, away from the other residents. "How did the talk with Ashley go?" Dorothy asked directly. Michael took a deep breath before answering. "It was hard. At first she denied everything, said you must have misunderstood some conversation about something else. Then when I pressed her, she admitted that yes, she had talked to someone about care options for you." Dorothy felt her heart race. Finally, Ashley had admitted something. "What else did she say?" "She said she was worried about your mental health, that she'd noticed signs of confusion and forgetfulness. She said she researched quality nursing homes because she wanted to be prepared if things got worse. Michael, I don't have any memory or mental confusion issues. Every doctor I've seen has confirmed that." "I know, Mom. That's why the conversation was so hard. Because Ashley insists she's noticed things I haven't." "What kind of things?" "She said you've forgotten conversations, repeated questions, gotten lost inside the house. She said she's been writing everything down in a notebook to show me when the time came." Dorothy felt anger rising inside her. Ashley had fabricated false documentation to support her lies. "Michael, I've never gotten lost in the house I've lived in for 2 years. I've never forgotten important conversations. And if Ashley has a notebook with notes about me, why have you never seen it? She said she didn't want to worry me unnecessarily, that she was waiting to gather enough evidence before talking to me." "And you believe that?" Michael hesitated before answering, and that hesitation told Dorothy more than any words. "Good. Mom, I honestly don't know what to believe anymore. You're both telling me completely different versions of the same situation. Then tell me one thing, son. In all these months living with you, have you personally noticed any signs that I was getting confused or forgetful?" Michael stayed silent for a long time, thinking. "To be honest, no, but I work so much I barely have time to pay attention to those things." "Exactly. And Ashley knew that. She knew you'd trust her word about my mental state because you don't have time to see for yourself." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing, "But Mom, why would Ashley do this? What reason would she have to want to put you in a home?" That was the question Dorothy knew was coming, and it was the hardest to answer without sounding paranoid. "Michael, have you ever thought about the freedom Ashley would have if I weren't in the house? The privacy you'd both have, the money you'd save?" "Mom, money was never an issue. I earn well enough to support our family. It's not just about money, son. It's about control, about power. Ashley doesn't like sharing her space with me. She tolerates my presence, but she'd be much happier if I weren't there. Are you sure you're not being unfair to her? Ashley has always been very respectful toward you. Dorothy realized she was fighting an uphill battle. Michael wanted to believe her, but he also didn't want to believe his wife was capable of such manipulation. Michael, I just ask one thing. When you go home today, pay attention to how Ashley behaves. See if she really shows genuine concern for me, or if it's just an act for you. Okay, Mom, I'll pay closer attention. But what about you? Are you coming home? Not yet. I need to be sure I'll be safe there, and I need you to fully understand what's happening before I return. Michael nodded, but Dorothy could see he was torn and confused. One last thing, son. If Ashley was truly worried about my mental health, why didn't she talk to you first before looking into nursing homes? Why did she do it all behind my back? That question seemed to hit Michael differently than the others. He was thoughtful for a few minutes before answering. You're right. That really doesn't make sense. After Michael left, Dorothy sat in Harmony House's garden watching the sunset. Mrs. Ruth came to sit beside her. How did the talk with your son go? Complicated. Ashley has confused him with an alternate version of events. Now he doesn't know who to believe. That's normal, dear. When someone lies with conviction, they can be very convincing, but the truth has its own strength. It always finds a way to come out. I hope you're right, Mrs. Ruth, because if Ashley convinces Michael that I'm losing my mind, my life as I know it will be over. That night, Dorothy spoke at length with Jennifer on the phone. The young nurse had become her main confidant and source of emotional support. Mrs. Dorothy, no matter what happens with Michael and Ashley, you have options. You can stay at Harmony House as long as you need, reach out to other relatives, or even find a small apartment to live on your own. Jennifer, I'm 72 years old and have $32 in my pocket. What apartment am I going to afford? You're entitled to your pension, right? With the social worker's help, we can work on getting you back in control of your own finances. That conversation gave Dorothy a new perspective. She had grown so used to depending on Michael and Ashley that she'd forgotten she had rights and choices. The next day, Dr. Barbara scheduled another meeting, this time including Ashley. Dorothy was nervous but also eager to finally confront her daughter-in-law directly. The meeting was set for 3 in the afternoon at the hospital. Dorothy arrived with Jennifer and found Michael and Ashley already waiting in Dr. Barbara's office. Ashley was flawless as always, perfectly styled hair, subtle yet elegant makeup, clothes that conveyed respectability and sincerity. She greeted Dorothy with a smile that seemed genuinely concerned. Mom, what a scare you gave us. We were desperate. Are you okay? Are they treating you well here? Ashley's performance was so convincing that for a moment Dorothy almost doubted her own memories. Almost. I'm fine, Ashley. Thanks for your concern. Dr. Barbara began the meeting by explaining the protocol they'd follow. Each person would have the chance to present their side, and then they'd try to reach a common understanding. Mrs. Dorothy, would you like to start by repeating what you told us in the first meeting? Dorothy recounted again the phone conversation she had overheard, the signs she had noticed, and how she felt isolated and controlled at home. When she finished, Ashley asked to speak. Doctor, I understand my mother-in-law is going through a difficult time. Losing her husband was very traumatic for her, and since then, I've noticed concerning changes in her behavior. Ashley spoke in a calm, rational voice, as if she were a healthcare professional presenting a clinical case. She has shown signs of paranoia, creating theories about people supposedly trying to harm her. She's forgotten conversations we've had, repeated questions multiple times, gotten lost in our own house. Ashley, can you give specific examples? Asked Dr. Barbara. Of course. Last week she asked me 3 times in the same day what time Michael would get home from work. Yesterday she insisted she had bought a medication she never purchased, and there are times she just stands in the hallway as if she doesn't know where she is. Dorothy listened to these accusations with a mix of indignation and shock. Ashley was lying with impressive conviction, inventing situations that had never happened. That's not true, Dorothy said firmly. I've never gotten lost in the house, never repeated questions obsessively, never made up medications I didn't buy. Mother, I understand you might not remember these situations. That's part of the condition I'm trying to explain to everyone. Ashley had found the perfect strategy. Any denial from Dorothy could be interpreted as another sign of memory loss. Ashley, Jennifer interjected, you mentioned you've been noting these situations in a notebook. Did you bring it today? Ashley hesitated for a fraction of a second before answering. I didn't bring it because I didn't think it would be necessary, but I can get it from home if it's important. It would be important, yes, said Dr. Barbara. Documentation from the time of the events would be very helpful in understanding the situation. Of course, I can bring it tomorrow. Dorothy knew Ashley would use the night to create this supposed notebook with false notes. The manipulation was reaching levels she hadn't imagined her daughter-in-law was capable of. Ashley, Dorothy said, deciding to confront her directly, can you explain the phone conversation I overheard on Monday night? The one about documents and convincing Michael? Ashley put on an expression of genuine confusion. Mother, I had several phone calls on Monday. Could you be more specific about which one? The conversation where you talked about finding a suitable place for me, about the documents you had already arranged, about how to convince Michael. Oh yes, I was talking to my cousin about her grandmother's situation. She's going through something similar and asked for advice on how to discuss specialized care with the family. Ashley's reply was so quick and convincing that Dorothy realized she had anticipated this question and prepared an explanation. So you confirm you were talking about placing someone in a nursing home. I was giving advice to my cousin about her grandmother, yes. Maybe you overheard part of the conversation and misunderstood. Michael, who had stayed quiet until then, asked Ashley, why didn't you tell me about this concern with my cousin? Again, Ashley didn't hesitate. Because she asked me to keep her grandmother's situation confidential. It's a sensitive issue in her family. Dorothy felt growing frustration. Ashley had an answer for everything, and her answers were logical and convincing. She was beginning to understand why Michael was confused. Dr. Barbara, said Ashley, I'd like to suggest that my mother-in-law undergo a complete neurological evaluation. I'm sure it would clarify many things. The suggestion sounded reasonable, and Dorothy saw in Michael's eyes that he was considering the idea. I don't oppose a medical evaluation, said Dorothy, but I'd like it to be done by an independent professional, someone who doesn't know any of us beforehand. Of course, agreed Dr. Barbara. I can arrange a neurological evaluation with a geriatric specialist at the hospital. It would be completely impartial. The meeting ended with the medical evaluation scheduled for the following week. Dorothy left the hospital feeling conflicted. On one hand, she was confident the tests would prove she had no cognitive issues. On the other, she was worried about Ashley's ability to craft convincing explanations for any situation. How did you feel about the meeting? Asked Jennifer, as they walked. Impressed by Ashley's ability to lie while looking people straight in the eye, she's far more dangerous than I realized. But did you notice how she hesitated when I asked about the notebook? And how her explanation about the phone call sounded rehearsed? I did, but I'm not sure Michael and Dr. Barbara noticed the same thing. The important part is that we'll now have an official medical evaluation. It'll confirm that you're fully lucid and capable of making your own decisions. Back at Harmony House, Dorothy recounted the meeting to the other residents. Mr. Richard, who had been through a similar situation with his own children, offered some advice. Mrs. Dorothy, manipulative people like that are very skilled at appearing innocent and sincere, but they always make small mistakes. You need to watch for those mistakes and document them. How so, Mr. Richard? For example, she said she was talking to her cousin about the cousin's grandmother. It would be easy to check if that cousin even exists and if her grandmother is really going through that situation. Mrs. Betty also shared her perspective. And another important thing, she claimed she's been writing down these supposed episodes of confusion in a notebook, but she's never shown it to Michael. What kind of concerned wife would hide important health information about her mother-in-law from her own husband? These observations gave Dorothy new hope. Maybe Ashley wasn't as perfect in her lies as she seemed. That night, Dorothy had a long phone conversation with Jennifer. Jennifer, I wanted to ask you a favor. Could you look into whether this cousin of Ashley's actually exists? I'm sure it's a lie, but I need proof. Of course, Mrs. Dorothy, I'll try to find out. And you could try to recall other situations where you might verify Ashley's stories. Dorothy spent the night mentally reviewing the past few months, trying to identify other lies or inconsistencies in Ashley's behavior. The next morning, Michael called Harmony House. He wanted to speak to Dorothy alone without Ashley present. Mom, after yesterday's meeting, I've been thinking a lot about everything that was said. And I have some questions for you. Go ahead, son. Do you remember ever repeatedly asking what time I'd be home or getting confused about your medications? Michael, I've never done any of those things. And if I had, don't you think I'd remember? That's exactly what's bothering me. If you really were having episodes of confusion, it would make sense that you wouldn't remember them. But at the same time, you always seem completely lucid and coherent whenever we talk. Dorothy felt immense relief realizing Michael was starting to question Ashley's version of events. Son, I may be getting older, but my mind is as sharp as it's ever been. If you want, you can ask me anything about the past, about the family, about anything. You'll see my memory is just fine. No need, Mom. I know you remember everything perfectly. That's why I'm starting to doubt some things Ashley told me. What kind of things? Well, last night I asked her about this cousin who supposedly has problems with her grandmother. She couldn't give me any details about who this cousin was or what exactly was going on with the grandmother. Dorothy felt her heart race. Ashley had made a mistake. And what did she say when you asked? She said I didn't know this cousin because she was from her ex-husband's family. But Mom, Ashley was never married before. She always told me I was her first husband. Now Ashley had made a serious mistake. She'd created such a complicated lie that she was contradicting herself. Michael, did you confront her about this? Not yet. I wanted to talk to you first. Mom, I'm starting to think you might be right about Ashley. Dorothy felt a mix of relief and sadness. Relief because Michael was finally seeing the truth. Sadness because it meant the family he'd built was based on lies. Son, I know this is hard for you. Ashley is your wife, you love her. It's not easy to discover the person we trust might not be who we thought they were. Mom, if everything you're saying is true, it means I failed as a son. It means I let my own wife mistreat my mother right under my nose. Michael, you didn't fail as a son. You work hard, you trust people, and Ashley took advantage of that. Manipulative people are very skilled at deceiving even those closest to them. But I should have noticed something. I should have paid more attention. What matters now is that you are paying attention, and we can work together to fix this. Michael scheduled another conversation for the next day, this time wanting to understand all the signs he'd missed over the months. When Jennifer heard about the contradiction in Ashley's story, she was thrilled. Mrs. Dorothy, this is excellent. Now we have a proven lie. And if she lied about this, how many other things has she lied about? But Jennifer, I'm worried about Michael. He's blaming himself for not noticing sooner. It's normal for him to feel that way. Finding out he's been deceived for so long is traumatic, but with time he'll understand it wasn't his fault. The next day, Michael arrived at Harmony House with a serious, determined expression. He'd spent the night reflecting on everything and was ready to hear his mother's full story without defending Ashley. Mom, I want you to tell me everything from the beginning. Every sign you noticed, every strange situation, everything that made you feel something was wrong. Dorothy told him everything again, but this time in much greater detail. She talked about how Ashley always found excuses to interrupt their conversations, about the subtle comments on nursing homes and specialized care, about how she'd gradually lost control over aspects of her own life. And you know what bothers me most, son? Ashley was always so affectionate with me when you were around, but when we were alone she was cold and distant. It was like she was playing two different roles. Michael listened quietly, nodding occasionally, as if recognizing situations he'd witnessed but hadn't understood at the time. Mom, now that you mention it, I remember so many times when I'd come home and Ashley would immediately find some way to pull me away from the room where you were. She'd always say you were tired, or that she had something important to show me, or that she needed my help with something urgent. Exactly. She controlled when and how we talked. And there's more. Over the last few weeks, Ashley started suggesting it might be better for you to have a room on the ground floor so you wouldn't have to climb stairs. She said she was worried you might fall and hurt yourself. Michael, I go up and down those stairs every day without any trouble, and my room has been upstairs for 2 years. Now I get it. She wanted to isolate you even more, make it harder for you to reach me or the rest of the house. The conversation lasted almost 3 hours. By the end, Michael was convinced Dorothy had been the victim of prolonged, systematic manipulation. Mom, I need to apologize. I should have seen what was happening. I should have protected you. Son, you don't have to apologize. Ashley is very convincing and you trusted her. What matters is that now you know the truth, but now I don't know what to do. How do I confront Ashley with all this? How do I end a marriage over this? Michael, those are decisions only you can make. But one thing's certain, you can't keep living with someone who's capable of doing this to her own family. That night, Michael went home determined to confront Ashley. He decided not to reveal what he'd learned, but to watch her behavior and gather more evidence of her lies. The next day, Jennifer called Dorothy with important news. Mrs. Dorothy, I found out some things about Ashley. I talked to a few people from the neighborhood where she lived before marrying Michael, and I uncovered some interesting details. What did you find? First, she was never actually married before. So that story about the cousin of her ex-husband was definitely a lie. Second, neighbors remember her as very charming and helpful in public, but some mentioned she had a manipulative side. What kind of comments? One neighbor said Ashley took care of her elderly mother for a few months, and the old woman always seemed nervous and scared when alone with her. The neighbor even offered help several times, but Ashley always refused, saying she had everything under control. And what happened to her mother? She was placed in a nursing home and passed away soon after. The neighbor said it always seemed strange because the woman had seemed healthy and independent before Ashley started taking care of her. The news felt like a knife to Dorothy's heart. Ashley had done this before. She had a pattern, a strategy she'd already tested on her own mother. Jennifer, did you find anything about that nursing home where Ashley's mother was placed? I got the name, but it closed 2 years ago. There were multiple complaints about mistreatment and poor conditions. Dorothy felt sick. Ashley hadn't just planned to send her away against her will. She'd likely chosen a place where she'd be abused. We need to tell Michael right away. I already called him. He's on his way here. When Michael arrived at Harmony House and heard what Jennifer had uncovered, he was visibly shaken. My God, Mom, Ashley did this to her own mother and was planning to do the same to you. Worse, son. She picked a nursing home with reports of mistreatment. This wasn't just about getting rid of me. It was about making me suffer. Michael sat with his head in his hands, clearly devastated. How could I have been so blind? How did I marry someone capable of this? Michael, said Jennifer gently, people like Ashley are very skilled at hiding their true nature. They specialize in appearing exactly what others want to see. But now I know the truth, and I can't stay married to her. Son, that's a very important decision, are you sure? Mom, how could I keep living with someone who planned to mistreat my own mother? Someone who did the same to her own mother? That night, Michael confronted Ashley. He told her everything he had discovered, all the contradictions in her stories, all the evidence that she had been lying systematically. Ashley's reaction was exactly what Dorothy had predicted. First, she denied everything. Then she tried to justify her actions, saying she was only concerned about everyone's well-being. Finally, when she realized Michael wasn't buying her excuses, she went on the attack. Ashley accused Michael of being manipulated by a senile and paranoid mother-in-law. She said he was choosing a confused old woman over trusting his own wife. She made threats about what would happen if he kicked her out, but Michael didn't back down. He had seen too much proof to keep doubting. He told Ashley to leave the house and said he would file for divorce. Ashley left that same night, but not without one last threat. You're going to regret this, Michael. And your dear mother will regret it too. The next day, Michael called Dorothy to tell her everything. Mom, Ashley left last night. The marriage is over. Dorothy felt a mix of relief and worry. Relief because the truth had finally come out. Worry because she knew Ashley well enough to realize she wouldn't give up easily. How are you feeling, son? Devastated, but also relieved. It's hard to explain. I'm sad about losing the marriage, but also glad I found out the truth before it was too late. What happens now? Now I want you to come back home. This is your home as much as it is mine." But Dorothy hesitated. As much as she wanted to go back, she was worried about Ashley's threats. "Son, I'm afraid Ashley might try something against us. You saw how she reacted when she was confronted." "Mom, we can't let fear control us. She might try something. But now we know who she really is, and we have proof of all her lies. But what if she makes up some story? What if she tries to convince people that you're mistreating your own mother because of a manipulative mother-in-law? Then we'll prove she's lying. We have Jennifer as a witness. We have Dr. Barbara. We have everything we found out about her past." Dorothy decided to go back home, but asked Jennifer to stay with them for the first few days in case Ashley tried anything. Returning home was emotional. Dorothy had missed her things, her room, the feeling of being home. But there was also sadness in the air. The house felt empty without Ashley, and Dorothy could see Michael was hurting even though he'd done the right thing. "You miss her, don't you, son?" "I miss who I thought she was. I miss the woman I fell in love with, who may have never really existed." In the days that followed, life slowly returned to normal. Michael and Dorothy went back to their long conversations, like they used to before Ashley started interfering. They cooked together on weekends, watched TV together at night, and gradually rebuilt the family closeness that had been lost. But the peace didn't last. A week after Dorothy came back, the doorbell rang late at night. When Michael opened the door, he found 2 police officers. "Good evening. We received a report that an elderly woman is being held against her will at this address. May we come in to verify?" Michael was stunned. Ashley had found a way to attack using the law itself. "Of course you may come in, but I think there's been a misunderstanding. My mother lives here of her own free will." The officers entered and asked to speak with Dorothy. She explained her situation, telling them about Ashley's manipulation, her escape from the house, and how she had uncovered the truth. "Are you here of your own free will?" one of the officers asked. "Absolutely. This is my home. I live here with my son." "Have you ever been institutionalized against your will in any nursing home?" "No. My former daughter-in-law planned it, but I found out and left before she could do anything." "Would you like to file a report against anyone?" Dorothy looked at Michael, who nodded encouragingly. "Yes, I'd like to file a report against my former daughter-in-law for attempted forced institutionalization and exploitation of a vulnerable senior." The officers noted all the information and said the case would be investigated. After they left, Michael was furious. "Ashley is trying to use the law against us. What kind of person does that?" "A desperate person who's lost control of the situation," Dorothy replied. "But now we know she'll keep trying to harm us." The next day, Jennifer brought more troubling news. Ashley had gone to some neighbors, telling a completely different version of events. She claimed she was worried about Dorothy's mental health and that Michael had been manipulated by his senile mother. "Some neighbors are confused," Jennifer reported. "Ashley is very convincing, and she's planting doubts about your mental state." "That's exactly what I feared," Dorothy said. "Ashley will try to ruin my reputation so no one believes my side of the story." But Michael had an idea. He suggested organizing a meeting with the neighbors to clarify the situation. Dr. Barbara offered to participate as an impartial professional, and Jennifer brought the evidence she had gathered about Ashley's past. The meeting took place at Tuasias, Mrs. Martha's house, a 70-year-old neighbor who had lived on the street for over 20 years. About 10 neighbors attended, all curious to understand what was really happening. Dorothy told her story once again. This time she had the support of Michael, Jennifer, and Dr. Barbara, who confirmed the facts and presented evidence. "I understand. It's hard to believe Ashley could do this," Dorothy told the neighbors. "She's always been so charming and helpful with all of you, but that was exactly her strategy, to seem perfect in public while planning terrible things in private." Mrs. Martha, who had observed the dynamic between Dorothy and Ashley over the past 2 years, made an important comment. "You know, now that you mention it, I always thought it was strange how quiet and withdrawn Dorothy seemed around Ashley. Before, when you first moved here, she was much more talkative and sociable. Other neighbors began recalling situations that had seemed normal at the time but now took on new meaning. Ashley always spoke for Dorothy when someone asked her questions. She always explained that her mother-in-law was having a hard day when Dorothy seemed sad or worried. "And there's something else," said Mr. Anthony, the neighbor next door. "A few times I overheard Ashley talking on the phone in the backyard, and she always seemed to be arguing with someone about money or paperwork. I thought it was her personal business, but now I wonder if it was about Dorothy." The meeting was a success. By the end, all the neighbors were convinced Dorothy had been a victim of manipulation and that Ashley had tried to deceive them too. In the following days, Ashley's attempt to manipulate the neighbors' opinion backfired. Now that they knew the truth, the neighbors began recalling other strange and questionable behaviors from Ashley. Mrs. Martha told Dorothy that Ashley had tried to convince her that Michael was mistreating his mother and that she, Ashley, was trying to protect Dorothy by arranging proper care for her. She said Michael had financial troubles and was considering putting you in a public nursing home to save money, Mrs. Martha shared. "I thought it was odd because Michael always seemed so devoted to you." This information was particularly painful for Michael. Not only had Ashley planned to mistreat his mother, but she had also tried to ruin his reputation with the neighbors. But Ashley's attacks didn't stop there. A few weeks later, Dorothy received a call from her sister Margaret in Long Island. "Dorothy, what's this story a young woman told me about you having mental problems and Michael mistreating you?" Dorothy felt her blood run cold. Ashley had gotten Margaret's phone number and called her to spread lies. "Margaret, that woman was Ashley, Michael's ex-wife. She's lying because we discovered her plans to institutionalize me against my will." "But Dorothy, she seemed so concerned about you. She said she was trying to help and that Michael wouldn't let anyone talk to you." Dorothy spent over an hour on the phone explaining the whole situation to Margaret. Thankfully, her sister knew her well enough to see she was completely lucid and coherent. "My goodness, Dorothy, what kind of person does something like that?" And I almost believed her. "A very dangerous person, Margaret, and one who won't give up easily." Ashley had also called some other distant relatives and even Dorothy's former co-workers, always with the same story. Dorothy was senile, Michael was abusing her, and Ashley was the only one who cared enough to try to help. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing, Ashley's smear campaign was deeply affecting Dorothy and Michael's lives. They found themselves forced to spend time and energy explaining the truth to every person Ashley had contacted. "Son, she's trying to destroy our lives," Dorothy said one night, clearly exhausted by the situation. "We won't let her succeed, Mom. We have the truth on our side, and that's more powerful than all her lies." But the situation got even worse when Ashley sued Michael for abandonment of the home and parental alienation, claiming he had kicked her out under the influence of a manipulative mother-in-law. The lawsuit was stressful and painful. Ashley hired an aggressive lawyer who tried to portray Dorothy as a confused, manipulative elderly woman who had destroyed a happy marriage. During the hearings, Dorothy had to relive the entire ordeal multiple times. Ashley's lawyer subjected her to long, humiliating interrogations, trying to make her contradict herself or appear confused. "Mrs. Dorothy, are you sure you heard the phone conversation you mentioned correctly? Isn't it possible you misunderstood what was said?" "I'm absolutely sure. I heard Ashley talking about documents, a place she had picked, and how to convince my son. But you admit you were eavesdropping, correct? And that you might have only heard parts of the conversation?" "I heard enough to understand exactly what she was planning." "Mrs. Dorothy, have you ever had episodes of mental confusion? Have you ever forgotten where you put things or what you were doing?" "No more than anyone else my age. My mind is perfectly clear." The interrogation lasted for hours, and Dorothy left the hearing feeling humiliated and exhausted. But Michael's lawyer, Mr. William, had prepared well. He presented all the evidence they had gathered, the information about Ashley's past, the contradictions in her stories, the neighbors' testimonies, Dorothy's neurological evaluation, confirming her full mental capacity. "Your Honor," said Mr. William in his closing arguments, "we are facing a clear case of systematic manipulation of an elderly woman by someone who had committed similar acts in the past. The plaintiff's attempt to reverse the situation through the courts is nothing more than another manifestation of her manipulative behavior." The judge's decision was clear. Ashley's request was denied, and she was warned about the possible legal consequences of making false accusations against the elderly. But even after losing in court, Ashley didn't give up. She began following Dorothy and Michael, showing up in places she knew they would be, always trying to cause embarrassment or spread her lies to new people. "She's stalking us," Michael told Jennifer after Ashley appeared at the supermarket where they were shopping. "This is turning into harassment." "You need to document every incident," Jennifer advised. "If you can prove she's stalking you, you can request a restraining order." Dorothy started carrying a small recorder wherever she went, hoping to capture Ashley making threats or spreading lies. They also began noting every time she showed up uninvited. The psychological toll was mounting. Dorothy, who had emotionally recovered after learning the truth, began feeling anxious and depressed again. "I feel like I'm being hunted," she confessed to Mrs. Ruth when visiting Harmony House. "I can't relax because I never know when she'll appear." "My dear, you must stay strong. People like Ashley thrive on the fear and distress they cause. The more you let it affect you, the more power she has over your life." But Mrs. Ruth's wisdom, though true, was hard to put into practice. Dorothy was dealing with someone who had proven capable of elaborate lies, systematic manipulation, and relentless pursuit. The situation reached its breaking point when Ashley showed up at Dorothy and Michael's doorstep in the early morning, ringing the doorbell insistently and shouting accusations. "Michael, you're killing your own mother. She needs care you can't provide. I just wanted to help." Michael called the police, and Ashley was taken to the station for disturbing the peace. This time, she spent the night in jail and was forced to sign an agreement promising to stay away from Michael and Dorothy's home. "Finally," Michael said when he heard the decision, "maybe now she'll understand she can't keep harassing us." But Dorothy wasn't so optimistic. She knew Ashley well enough to realize a night in jail had likely only fueled her anger and determination to retaliate. And she was right. Ashley changed tactics. Instead of direct confrontations, she turned to subtler methods. She began spreading rumors about Michael at his workplace, suggesting he was under emotional stress due to family issues and that it might be affecting his professional performance. She also started calling senior protection agencies with anonymous reports of alleged mistreatment of Dorothy. Each report led to a visit from social workers who had to verify the situation. Though the visits always confirmed Dorothy was well cared for and happy, they were stressful and humiliating. Dorothy felt as if she constantly had to prove her own sanity and well-being. "This can't go on like this," said Michael after the third visit in a month. "Ashley is using the system against us." Mr. William, Michael's lawyer, suggested filing a lawsuit for emotional distress against Ashley, but Dorothy hesitated. "Son, if we file another lawsuit, it'll drag on for years. I just want peace. I want my life to go back to normal." "But Mom, if we do nothing, she'll keep harassing us forever." Jennifer offered a different perspective. "Maybe you should consider moving. I know it's not fair to have to leave your home because of her, but sometimes a fresh start somewhere else is the best solution." The idea of moving broke Dorothy's heart. She had grown used to the house, the neighbors, the routine she had built, but at the same time she was tired of living under constant tension. "What if we move and she finds out where we are?" asked Dorothy. "We can take precautions," Michael replied. "Use a P.O. box, keep the new address private, maybe even change our last name temporarily." The decision to move was difficult but necessary. Michael managed to get a transfer to his company's branch in Boston, and they began looking for a house in the new city. The move was carefully planned. They didn't tell anyone except Jennifer and a few trusted friends. They hired a moving company that would pick up their belongings at night when Ashley likely wouldn't be watching. The last week in New York City was tense. Dorothy quietly said goodbye to places that had become important to her. Harmony House, the hospital where she met Jennifer, the neighbors who had become friends. "It feels like we're running away," Dorothy said sadly. "We're not running, Mom. We're making a fresh start. There's a difference." The move went smoothly. Within a week, they were settled into a cozy house in a quiet neighborhood in Boston. Michael started working at the company's new branch, and Dorothy began adjusting to her new routine. For a few months, peace reigned. Ashley hadn't discovered where they were, and gradually, they started to relax. Dorothy joined a knitting group at the local church. Michael made friends with some co-workers, and they began building a new life. "You know, son, I think moving was a good idea," Dorothy said one evening over dinner. "Here, I feel free again. I feel better too, Mom. It's like we left all our problems behind." But the peace didn't last. 6 months after the move, Dorothy was leaving the pharmacy when she spotted a familiar figure on the corner. Ashley was there, watching her. Dorothy's blood ran cold. How had Ashley found them, and how long had she been watching? Dorothy quickly ducked into a nearby store and called Michael. "Son, Ashley is here. She found us." "Are you sure, Mom?" "Absolutely sure. She was on the corner by the pharmacy, watching me." "I'm coming to get you now. Don't leave the store until I get there." Michael arrived in 20 minutes, but Ashley had already disappeared. They drove home in silence, both knowing their peace was over. In the following days, they began noticing signs they were being watched. A strange car parked on their street, someone tampering with the mailbox, phone calls with no one on the line. "How did she find us?" Dorothy asked. "I don't know, Mom. Maybe she hired a private investigator, or maybe she followed some clue we left behind." Jennifer, who kept in regular contact with them, offered a possible explanation. "Ashley is very smart and persistent. She might have used social media, public records, or even contacted old acquaintances to find out where you moved." The discovery that Ashley had found them brought back all the anxiety and fear they had experienced in New York City. Dorothy started feeling hunted again, and Michael was constantly worried about his mother's safety. They considered moving once more, but both Michael and Dorothy were tired of running. They decided it was time to face Ashley once and for all. "We can't spend the rest of our lives running from her," Michael said. "We have to find a way to make this stop for good." Mr. William came from New York City for a consultation and brought bad news. Ashley had discovered their new address because she had hired a private investigator. Worse still, she had moved to Boston as well. "She's obsessed with you," Mr. William said. "This has gone beyond normal revenge. It's a sick obsession." "What can we do to protect ourselves?" Dorothy asked. "I can file for a stricter, restraining order based on systematic stalking and her move to the same city. I can also sue her for emotional distress and harassment." But Mr. William also brought unexpected news. During his investigations into Ashley, he had discovered she wasn't acting alone. Ashley has a sister, Stephanie, who's apparently helping her with the stalking. They work together, one watches while the other acts. This explained how Ashley managed to be in so many places at once, and how she had found them so quickly in Boston. "How many people are involved in this?" Michael asked, visibly shaken. "From what I've uncovered, at least Ashley and her sister. There could be others, but I'm still investigating." The discovery that there was a network of people pursuing them made Dorothy feel utterly helpless. How could two elderly people defend themselves against an organized group? But Jennifer had an idea. She suggested they use Ashley's own obsession against her. "If Ashley is so obsessed with chasing you, let's give her exactly what she wants, a chance for a final confrontation. But this time we'll be prepared." Jennifer's plan was risky but clever. They would create a situation where Ashley would be lured into a confrontation, but everything would be documented and witnessed, so her actions would be officially recorded. "Let's organize a public meeting on senior rights at the local library," Jennifer explained. "We'll announce that Mrs. Dorothy will share her story as an example of overcoming adversity. I'm sure Ashley won't resist the temptation to show up and try to discredit or cause trouble." "But what if she comes prepared? What if she brings her sister or others?" Michael asked. "That's why we'll be prepared too. We'll have lawyers present, social workers, representatives from senior protection agencies, and even a videographer documenting everything. The plan was set in motion. The meeting was scheduled for a Saturday afternoon at the Boston Public Library. The event was advertised in local newspapers as Meeting on Rights and Dignity for Seniors, highlighting Dorothy's testimony about her experience. As expected, the news reached Ashley. On the morning of the event, she and Stephanie were seen scouting the meeting location. "They're here," Jennifer told Dorothy when they arrived at the library. "They're in the parking lot watching who goes in." Dorothy felt her stomach tighten, but she was determined to face the situation once and for all. The library was packed. Besides the genuinely interested audience, present were Mr. William, Dr. Barbara, representatives from the Boston Department of Social Services, and Jennifer with a discreet camera. Dorothy began to tell her story. She spoke about the systematic manipulation she had endured, about discovering the plans for forced institutionalization, about fleeing her home in the middle of the night, and about all the persecution that followed. "What I learned from this experience," Dorothy told the audience, "is that seniors have rights, they have a voice, and they deserve to be treated with dignity. No one can make decisions about our lives without our consent, no matter their justifications." That's when Ashley spoke up. She had quietly entered the library during the presentation and now stood up in the middle of the crowd. "This woman is lying," Ashley shouted. "She's a confused old lady who destroyed my marriage with her paranoid fantasies." The audience turned to look, and Jennifer discreetly began filming. "I took care of her for 2 years," Ashley continued, visibly agitated. "I only wanted to help, only wanted her to have the care she deserved. And she made up this crazy story about forced institutionalization." Mr. Williams stood up calmly. "Ma'am, this is an educational meeting. If you have objections to the testimony, you can present them through the proper channels." "Proper channels?" Ashley laughed bitterly. "You believed a senile old woman, instead of listening to someone who actually cared about her." "Ashley," Dorothy said, keeping her voice steady, "you can stop this act. Everyone here knows the truth about what you did." "The truth? The truth is, you're a manipulator who can't stand to see other people happy. You couldn't handle that your son was married and found a way to push me out of his life." Ashley's accusation was so absurd, it sparked murmurs of outrage in the crowd. One of the social workers present stood up. "Ma'am, you're disrupting a public event. I'm going to have to ask you to leave." "I won't leave," Ashley yelled. "This woman ruined my life and now she's being treated like a hero. This is a farce." Then Stephanie, Ashley's sister, also spoke up. She had been pretending to be just another attendee but now revealed herself. "My sister is right. You've all been fooled by a cunning old woman who knows exactly how to manipulate people." Stephanie's presence confirmed Mr. Williams' suspicions about the conspiracy. Jennifer kept filming discreetly, capturing every accusation and threat from the 2 women. "Ashley, Stephanie," said Michael, who had stayed silent until now, "you're incriminating yourselves publicly. Everything you're saying is being documented, and there are dozens of witnesses here." "I don't care," Ashley shot back. "I'm tired of pretending to accept this injustice. Your mother is a manipulator, and you're a weak son who fell for her lies." Dr. Barbara, who had followed the case from the beginning, decided to step in. "Ashley, I'm the social worker who evaluated this situation from the start. I can confirm that Mrs. Dorothy never showed signs of mental confusion or manipulative tendencies. On the contrary, all evidence points to a pattern of systematic manipulation on your part." "You're all blind," Ashley screamed. "She fooled you just like she fooled my husband." "Ex-husband," Michael corrected firmly, "and the only one who fooled anyone here was you." The situation grew increasingly tense. Ashley was visibly losing control, and Stephanie seemed to be trying to calm her down discreetly. Then Ashley made her fatal mistake. In a moment of pure rage, she said, "I should have put you in that nursing home when I had the chance. At least there you'd learn your place." Ashley's public confession left the entire library in silence. She had just admitted, in front of dozens of witnesses and cameras, that she had indeed planned to institutionalize Dorothy against her will. "Ashley," said Mr. Williams, standing up, You have just publicly confessed to attempted unlawful confinement and exploitation of a vulnerable senior. I recommend you get a lawyer." Ashley seemed to realize the gravity of what she had just said. Her face paled and she looked around the library as if seeing clearly for the first time how many people were present. I didn't mean it like that. It was a misunderstanding." "Too late," said the social worker from the municipal department. "What was said here today will be reported to the proper authorities." Ashley and Stephanie quickly left the library, but the damage was done. The confession had been recorded, witnessed by dozens of people, and confirmed everything Dorothy had said about her former daughter-in-law's plans. After the two women left, the event continued much more peacefully. Dorothy concluded her presentation by speaking about the importance of reporting elder abuse and how the community can help protect its most vulnerable members. "What happened to me could happen to anyone," Dorothy said in her closing remarks. "But I've learned that when we have the courage to seek help and speak the truth, there are always people willing to support us." The event ended with a standing ovation for Dorothy. Many approached her afterward to share their own experiences or offer support. In the days that followed, the consequences of Ashley's confession unfolded quickly. The district attorney's office opened a formal investigation based not only on the public confession, but also on all the evidence gathered over the months. Ashley was charged with attempted exploitation of a vulnerable senior, emotional abuse, and stalking. Stephanie was charged as an accomplice. Both would face trial and possible jail time. "Finally," Michael said when he heard the charges, "finally they'll pay for what they did." But Dorothy, though relieved, felt no joy in the situation. "Son, I take no pleasure in seeing Ashley prosecuted. I just wish none of this had ever happened." "Mom, you shouldn't feel guilty." Ashley chose to act the way she did. The consequences are the result of her own actions. The trial was set for 6 months later. During that time, Ashley and Stephanie were prohibited from approaching Dorothy and Michael or contacting them in any way. At last, they could live in peace. Dorothy became fully integrated into the Boston community. Michael flourished at work, and gradually, they rebuilt a normal, happy life. Jennifer remained a loyal friend, visiting regularly and becoming practically part of the family. Dr. Barbara also stayed in touch, interested in following Dorothy's emotional recovery. "How do you feel now, months after everything you went through?" Dr. Barbara asked during one of her visits. "I feel like I've gotten my life back," Dorothy replied. "For a while I thought I'd lost my independence and dignity forever, but I've learned it's possible to rebuild everything, even at 72. The trial finally took place. Ashley was sentenced to 2 years in a halfway house and ordered to pay Dorothy compensation for emotional damages. Stephanie received a lighter sentence as an accomplice. When the verdict was read, Dorothy was present in the courtroom. She looked at Ashley one last time and felt only pity. Ashley had destroyed her own life with a sick obsession. "It's over," Michael said as they left the courthouse. "Yes," Dorothy agreed. "Now we can move forward." In the following months, Dorothy became an activist for seniors' rights in Boston. She regularly gave talks on how to recognize signs of abuse and manipulation and helped others going through similar situations. Michael met a kind and honest woman named Rachel, who worked as a teacher at a nearby school. This time, he was much more careful about observing how Rachel treated his mother and was relieved to see they had developed a genuine friendship. "Rachel is very different from Ashley," Dorothy commented after meeting her son's new girlfriend. "She treats me like a person, not an obstacle." A year after the trial, Dorothy was in her kitchen baking a cake to celebrate Michael's birthday when she reflected on everything she had been through. She had started as a vulnerable elderly woman, manipulated and isolated by someone she trusted. She had fled her home in the middle of the night without money or hope. But through courage, determination, and the help of good people like Jennifer, Dr. Barbara, and Mrs. Ruth, she had not only reclaimed her life, but transformed it into something better than before. Now she had a new community in Boston, new friends, a meaningful purpose helping other seniors, and a closer, more honest relationship with Michael than she'd ever had. "Michael," she said when her son came home from work, "do you know what I've learned from all this?" "What, Mom?" I learned it's never too late to start again. At 72, I thought my life was already set, that there was no room left for change or growth. But I was wrong. You're the strongest person I know, Michael said, hugging his mother. I'm not strong, son. I'm just someone who refused to give up. And that's something anyone can choose to do at any age. That night, as Dorothy prepared for bed in her peaceful home in Boston, she thought of all the people who had helped her along the way. Jennifer, who had become like a daughter to her. Dr. Barbara, who had believed her story when no one else did. Mrs. Ruth and the residents of Harmony House, who had shown her there are always people willing to help. She also thought of others, like her, who might be going through similar struggles at that very moment. Seniors being manipulated, controlled, or mistreated by family or caregivers. That's why Dorothy had decided to dedicate the rest of her life to helping them. She had learned that her experience, painful as it was, could be used to protect others from the same suffering. Ashley actually did me a favor, Dorothy said to herself before falling asleep. She showed me what I'm capable of when I'm threatened, and she gave me a purpose for the years I have left. The next morning, Dorothy woke up early and called Jennifer. Jennifer, dear, I've been thinking. How about we organize another event on senior rights? I'm sure there are still many people who need to hear our message. Mrs. Wilson, you never stop, do you? Jennifer laughed. Of course, let's do it. Do you have a date in mind? The sooner the better. Every day we don't act is another day someone could be suffering in silence. And so, at 73, Dorothy Wilson began a new chapter of her life, one dedicated not just to living, but to ensuring other seniors also had the chance to live with dignity, respect, and independence. 2 years later, Dorothy was honored by Boston's Department of Social Services for her volunteer work protecting seniors. At the ceremony, she was surrounded by Michael, Rachel, who had become her true daughter-in-law, Jennifer, and dozens of others whose lives she had touched through her efforts. When I fled my son's house on that cold dawn, said Dorothy in her acceptance speech, I thought my life was over. I discovered it was actually just beginning. The auditorium rose in a standing ovation that lasted several minutes. In the middle of the audience, an 80-year-old woman named Gladys wept with emotion. She had been one of the people Dorothy helped escape from an abusive situation with a drug-addicted son. Mrs. Dorothy saved me, whispered Gladys to the person beside her. If it weren't for her, I'd still be mistreated and robbed by my own son. After the ceremony, Dorothy was approached by a local newspaper reporter who wanted to write a story about her work. Mrs. Dorothy, you've helped over 100 vulnerable seniors. What motivates you to continue this work? The certainty that no one should endure the months of terror I went through, Dorothy replied, and the discovery that it's possible to turn a terrible experience into something that benefits others. Do you have a message for seniors who may be going through similar situations? Yes. Never accept someone making decisions about your life without consulting you. You have rights, you have a voice, and you deserve to be treated with respect. And if you're being mistreated or manipulated, know that help is available. Don't be afraid to seek support. And for family members who may be dealing with elderly relatives, remember that caring for an older person doesn't mean controlling them or deciding for them. It means supporting them, respecting them, and ensuring they maintain their autonomy and dignity. And always be wary of anyone who tries to isolate them or make important decisions without their input. The article was published on the front page of the newspaper and resonated throughout the region. Dorothy received dozens of calls from people wanting to share their own experiences or asking for help with situations they were facing. One call was particularly moving. It was from a 50-year-old woman named Deborah who suspected her stepmother was being manipulated by a caregiver hired for her sick father. Mrs. Dorothy, I read your story in the paper and related so much. My stepmother is being isolated from us by the caregiver, who claims she's too weak for visits, but when we do speak to her, she seems frightened and evasive. Dorothy immediately offered to help. Along with Jennifer and representatives from the Department of Social Services, she visited the family and uncovered that the caregiver was indeed mistreating the elderly woman and stealing her belongings. This is how it works, Dorothy explained to Deborah, after resolving the situation. People with bad intentions know exactly how to manipulate vulnerable seniors, but with knowledge and support, we can protect them. Dorothy's work continued to grow. She established a small non-profit called Dignity in Aging, which provided support, guidance, and protection for vulnerable seniors. Michael, seeing the positive impact of his mother's work, decided to contribute by using his accounting skills to help seniors who were being robbed or having their finances manipulated by family members or caregivers. Mom, what Ashley did to us was terrible, but it ended up leading to something very positive. How many people have we helped because of what we went through? Over 200, son, and every one of them represents a family spared the suffering we endured. Rachel also got involved, offering literacy classes for seniors who wanted to learn to read and write to become more independent. Knowledge is power, Rachel often told her elderly students. The more you know about your rights and the world around you, the harder it will be for someone to deceive or manipulate you. On a winter evening, 3 years after Dorothy escaped, from her son's house, she was sitting in her favorite armchair reviewing some cases her organization was following when Michael came home from work with surprising news. Mum, you won't believe what happened today. Ashley called me at the office. Dorothy felt a chill in her stomach. Ashley had served her sentence and had been free for a few months, but hadn't attempted any contact until now. What did she want? She wanted to apologize. Dorothy stayed silent for a few minutes, processing the information. An apology. She said she spent a lot of time in prison reflecting on what she'd done, said she was in therapy, and finally understood the gravity of her actions. She wanted to ask for forgiveness and thank us for not making the charges even more serious. And what did you say? I told her she needed to talk to you, not me, and that any apology would have to be sincere and backed by actions showing real change. Dorothy grew thoughtful. Part of her never wanted to see Ashley again, but another part, the part that had learned about forgiveness and second chances through her work with other seniors, was curious to know if Ashley had truly changed. If she calls here, I'll talk to her, Dorothy decided, but only once and only if she's truly remorseful. A few days later, Ashley called. Her voice sounded different, softer, less arrogant. Mrs. Dorothy, I know I have no right to ask for anything, but I'd really like to speak with you in person. There's so much I need to say. Dorothy agreed to meet her at a public cafe, with Jennifer present as a witness. The meeting was set for the following Saturday. When Ashley arrived at the cafe, Dorothy barely recognized her. She was thinner. With graying hair she made no effort to hide and wore simple clothes. More importantly, her eyes no longer held that calculating coldness Dorothy remembered. Mrs. Dorothy Jennifer, Ashley greeted them, sitting at the table. Thank you for agreeing to meet me. Ashley, Dorothy replied. You said you wanted to talk. I'm listening. Ashley took a deep breath before speaking. Mrs. Dorothy, I spent 2 years in prison thinking about what I did to you. At first I was still convinced I was right, that I was just trying to help. But over time, especially with therapy, I began to understand the truth. What truth? That I never truly cared about your well-being. I only cared about my own convenience. You were an obstacle to the life I wanted with Michael, and I decided to remove that obstacle in the way that suited me best. Dorothy listened in silence, watching Ashley's expressions carefully. I lied to myself, saying it was for your own good, that you'd be happier in a specialized facility. But the truth is, I knew exactly what kind of place I'd chosen. I knew you'd be mistreated there. The confession hit Dorothy like a punch to the gut. Ashley was admitting she had knowingly planned to put her in a place where she'd be abused. Why would you do that, Ashley? I never did anything to hurt you. Because I was a terrible person. I saw you as a threat to my happiness, and I acted like the selfish, cruel person I was. I have no excuses for what I did. And your sister, was Stephanie just helping you? Stephanie always did whatever I asked. I convinced her you were really causing problems, and she believed me. The blame is mine, not hers. Jennifer, who had stayed quiet until then, asked a question. Ashley, you mentioned therapy. What exactly did you learn? I learned that I have serious issues with empathy and control. I learned that I developed manipulative behavior patterns as a child and never questioned them until I was forced to in prison. And what happened to your mother, Ashley? Dorothy asked. We found out you did the same thing to her. Ashley began to cry. They were genuine tears, not the manipulative sobbing Dorothy remembered. My mother died alone and scared because I put my own convenience above her well-being. She lived in fear of me in her final months, and I pretended not to notice because it was easier that way. How do you feel about that now? I feel like a monster. I feel like someone who doesn't deserve forgiveness. But my therapist says, recognizing what I did is the first step to making sure I never do it to anyone again. Dorothy watched Ashley crying and felt something she didn't expect to feel: compassion. Not immediate forgiveness, but compassion for a person who had lost herself so completely that she ended up mistreating vulnerable people. Ashley, why did you want to talk to me? What do you hope to gain from this? I don't expect to gain anything, Mrs. Dorothy. I know I can never undo what I did. I just wanted you to know that I understand the gravity of my actions and that I'm truly sorry. And what are you doing now? How are you living? I work at a laundromat and live in a simple boarding house. I go to therapy twice a week and volunteer at a center for abandoned children on weekends. Abandoned children. My therapist thought working with vulnerable people would help me develop real empathy. At first it was hard, but now I understand how terrible it is when someone in a position of power mistreats those who are defenseless. The conversation lasted 2 hours. By the end, Dorothy still wasn't ready to forgive Ashley completely, but she could see that she had truly changed. Ashley, I need time to process all of this. I can't say I forgive you now, but I can say I believe you're genuinely sorry. I understand, Mrs. Dorothy. I don't expect forgiveness. I just hope that one day you can find complete peace about everything that happened. After Ashley left, Dorothy and Jennifer talked about the meeting. What did you think, Jennifer? Did she seem sincere? She did. But Mrs. Dorothy, even if she's really changed, that doesn't erase what she did. You're not obligated to forgive her. I know, but you know, Jennifer, after all the work we do helping people recover from trauma, I've learned that forgiveness is sometimes more for the person forgiving than the one being forgiven. Are you thinking of forgiving her? I'm thinking about not letting anger and resentment keep taking up space in my life. Whether that's forgiveness or not, I don't know. But I do know I want peace. That night, Dorothy talked at length with Michael about the meeting. What do you think, son? Did Ashley seem genuinely sorry? To be honest, Mom, I don't know if I care whether she's sorry or not. What she did was unforgivable, no matter how she feels about it now. But Michael, if she's really changed, it means she won't hurt anyone else. And that's important. That's true, but it doesn't mean we have to let her back into our lives. Of course not. But it does mean maybe we can stop carrying the anger and move forward completely. Michael thought about his mother's words. Mom, you've always been wiser than me. If you think you can find peace through forgiveness, I support your decision. A few weeks later, Dorothy called Ashley. Ashley, I've been thinking a lot about our conversation. I want you to know I choose not to hold anger against you. That doesn't mean I forget what happened, but it means I choose to move forward. Mrs. Dorothy, this means more to me than you can imagine. Thank you. Ashley, there's one condition. If you've truly changed, I want you to use your experience to help others. I want you to stop others from doing what you did. How? Come work with us at the organization. Help educate families about the signs of elder abuse. Share your story so others understand how manipulation works. The offer took Ashley by surprise. You'd really let me do that? I'd let you try to truly make amends. But it would be volunteer work under supervision, and any sign of you slipping back into old patterns would mean immediate removal. Ashley accepted the offer. In the months that followed, she worked alongside Dorothy and Jennifer, helping identify cases of abuse and teaching families about manipulative behaviors. Her first talk was emotionally devastating. She had to tell an audience of about 50 people exactly how she had manipulated and mistreated Dorothy. I used every weakness I found, Ashley said, her voice trembling. I used the trust she had in me. I used the love she had for her family. I used her physical dependence to limit her emotionally. And I did it all knowing exactly how much I was hurting her. The audience listened in complete silence. After the talk, several people approached Ashley. Some to judge her, but others to say they recognized similar patterns in their own families. My daughter is doing exactly what you did to Mrs. Dorothy, an 80-year-old woman told Ashley. Thank you for helping me understand what's happening. In that moment, Ashley realized her terrible experience could actually help others. And for the first time since it all began, she felt she might find a way to contribute positively to the world. The collaboration between Dorothy and Ashley drew significant media attention. Newspapers and TV shows wanted to tell the story of the victim and the abuser working together to prevent similar abuses. It's unusual to see a situation where the person who caused harm becomes part of the solution, a journalist commented during an interview. How does this work in practice? It works because we both understand our personal experience can protect others, Dorothy replied. Ashley knows the tactics of manipulators because she was one. I know the signs that something's wrong because I lived through it. And Ashley, what's it like for you to work with the person you mistreated? It's humbling every day, Ashley answered honestly, but it's also necessary. Every time I see Mrs. Dorothy, I remember what I did and the responsibility I have to make sure it doesn't happen to anyone else. The program aired nationally and resulted in hundreds of calls from people reporting similar situations. Dorothy's organization had to expand to meet the demand. Jennifer became the regional coordinator for the project. Michael developed a financial protection system for vulnerable seniors, and Rachel created an educational program for schools about respect and elder care. 5 years after the night she fled, Dorothy was giving a speech in Washington, D.C. to representatives from senior protection organizations across the country. When I ran away from my son's house that night, she told the audience of over 300, I thought my life was over. I discovered I was actually about to begin the most important chapter of my existence. She shared her entire story, from the initial manipulation to her current work with Ashley. At the end, she made an emotional plea. Seniors of America, you have rights, you have a voice, and you deserve to be treated with dignity. Don't let anyone make decisions about your lives without consulting you. And if you're being mistreated, know that help is available and there are people willing to fight for you. The speech was followed by a 5-minute standing ovation. That evening, Dorothy received the National Human Rights Award for her work, protecting vulnerable seniors. This award isn't mine, she said in her acceptance speech. It belongs to everyone who helped me when I needed it, and to all the seniors who had the courage to report abuse and seek help. In the audience, Michael, Rachel, Jennifer, and even Ashley applauded with tears in their eyes. It was official recognition that Dorothy Wilson's terrible experience had become a force for good. At 78, Dorothy Wilson had become one of the leading voices in the fight for seniors' rights in America. Her organization had helped over 1,000 people, and her lectures had educated thousands of families on how to protect elderly members from abuse. Do you regret anything? A reporter asked during a special interview for her 80th birthday. I regret not having the courage to confront the early signs of manipulation, Dorothy replied. But I don't regret running away that night. It was the decision that changed my life for the better. And what's your message for other seniors who might be going through similar situations? It's never too late to start again. It's never too late to fight for your rights. And never let anyone treat you as if you're less important or less capable just because you're older. The interview ended with Dorothy sitting in her garden in Boston, surrounded by the family she had built over the years, Michael, Rachel, her 2 grandchildren, Jennifer, and dozens of people whose lives she had touched through her work. You know what I've learned all these years, she said, looking around at everyone. I've learned that family isn't just about blood. It's about the people who choose to stand by you, who respect you, and who fight for you when you need them. And I've learned that terrible experiences can turn into wonderful purposes if we have the courage to turn our pain into action. Michael walked up to his mother and hugged her. Mom, if you could go back in time, would you change anything? Dorothy thought for a long moment before answering. I'd change the suffering, of course, but I wouldn't change where it brought me. Because where I am now, surrounded by all of you, and knowing I've helped so many people is exactly where I was always meant to be. That night, as Dorothy got ready for bed, she looked out her bedroom window at the lights of Boston twinkling. In the distance, it was a sight she never tired of, especially because it represented freedom, safety, and the life she had built through her own courage. But her peace was interrupted by an unexpected call. It was nearly midnight when the phone rang. Michael answered first, but quickly handed it to Dorothy. "Mom, it's a woman who says she urgently needs to speak with you. She sounds like she's crying." Dorothy took the phone carefully. On the other end, a woman's voice, broken with desperation, began to speak. "Mrs. Dorothy, my name is Patricia. I got your number from the organization. Please help me. I'm running away from my daughter's house just like you did years ago." Dorothy's heart tightened. It was a situation she knew all too well. "Where are you now, Patricia?" "I'm at a gas station off the highway. I have nowhere to go. My daughter and son-in-law are planning to force me into a home tomorrow morning. I heard them talking about the papers they already signed." Dorothy didn't hesitate for a second. "Tell me which gas station you're at. I'll come get you, right now." "But Mrs. Dorothy, it's almost midnight." "The time doesn't matter, dear. No one should go through this alone." Dorothy woke Michael and Jennifer, and the three of them immediately left to pick up Patricia. On the way, Dorothy felt a familiar mix of anger and determination. Even after all these years working with similar cases, it still infuriated her to know there were families destroying the dignity of their elderly members. They found Patricia sitting on a bench at the gas station, a 75-year-old woman with a small suitcase and an expression of terror on her face. Her clothes were disheveled, and she was shaking from cold and nerves. "Patricia?" Dorothy called softly. The woman looked up and immediately recognized Dorothy from the photos she'd seen in the press. "Mrs. Dorothy, you really came." She quickly stood and hugged Dorothy as if clinging to a lifeline. "Of course I came, dear. Now tell me everything. That happened." On the drive back to Boston, Patricia shared her story. She had been widowed 2 years earlier and had since been living with her daughter Kimberly and son-in-law Jeffrey. At first, everything seemed normal, but gradually they began controlling every aspect of her life. First, they took away my driver's license, saying I was too old to drive. Then they closed my bank account and said they'd handle my money. And now I found out they've already signed papers to put me in a nursing home without even consulting me. Did you try talking to them about it? I did, but they say it's for my own good. They claim I'm getting forgetful and need specialized care. But Mrs. Dorothy, my mind is perfectly fine. I know exactly what's happening. Dorothy held Patricia's hand as Jennifer drove. "I believe you, dear, and we'll do everything necessary to protect you." That same night, Patricia was temporarily settled at Harmony House, which was still run by Mrs. Ruth. It was nearly 3 in the morning when they finally got her into a safe room. "Mrs. Ruth, I'm sorry to bother you at this hour," Dorothy said. "Nonsense, dear. This house exists precisely for moments like this. Patricia, you're welcome here. You're safe now." The next morning, Dorothy called Dr. Barbara, who, despite being retired, still consulted on special cases. She also reached out to Mr. William, who had specialized in elder law after Dorothy's case. "Mr. William, we have another urgent situation. I need you to stop a forced admission scheduled for today. I'll file an injunction immediately. Where's the documentation?" Patricia says her daughter has all the papers. Apparently, she got a medical order based on false information about her mother's mental state. "That's a crime, Dorothy. We won't just stop the admission. We'll investigate how they obtained that medical order." While Mr. William handled the legal aspects, Dorothy and Jennifer took Patricia for a full medical evaluation with a trusted geriatrician. As expected, the tests confirmed Patricia was in perfect mental and physical condition. "The results are clear," Dr. Henry said after examining her. "This woman shows no signs of dementia, confusion, or inability to make decisions. Any attempt to institutionalize her based on mental health concerns would be completely unjustified." Armed with this medical documentation, Dorothy and her team prepared to confront Kimberly and Jeffrey. But before they could take action, they received an unexpected call. It was Kimberly, Patricia's daughter, and she was furious. "Where is my mother? You have no right to kidnap a confused elderly woman." "Your mother is safe and well cared for," Dorothy replied calmly, "and she wasn't kidnapped. She ran away because she found out you were planning to commit her against her will. My mother is sick. She needs care that I can't provide." "Kimberly, your mother had a full medical evaluation this morning. She shows no mental or physical health issues that would justify commitment." "That's ridiculous. You don't know my mother like I do." The conversation was long and tense. Kimberly insisted her mother was becoming senile and that the family only wanted what was best for her. But when Dr. William asked to see the medical documentation they had used to get the commitment order, they discovered serious irregularities. The doctor who had signed the evaluation had never examined Patricia in person. He had based his assessment solely on information provided by Kimberly and Jeffrey, who had twisted normal behaviors to make them seem like symptoms of dementia. "This is falsification of medical records," Dr. William explained to Dorothy. "It's a federal crime." Kimberly and Jeffrey could be arrested for this, but Dorothy, remembering her own experience with Ashley, preferred to try a more conciliatory approach first. "Dr. William, let's schedule a family meeting before involving the police. Sometimes people do terrible things out of ignorance or fear, not malice." The meeting was set for the next day in Dr. Williams' office. Kimberly and Jeffrey arrived with a lawyer, clearly prepared for a legal battle. "We want our mother back immediately," Jeffrey declared as soon as they arrived. "Patricia is not your property," Dr. William replied. "She is a capable adult who has the right to decide where and how she wants to live." "She's being manipulated by these people," Kimberly accused, pointing at Dorothy and Jennifer. That's when Patricia, who had stayed quiet until then, decided to speak. "Kimberly, no one is manipulating me. I'm here because you planned to commit me without my consent, based on lies about my mental health." "Mom, you don't understand." "I understand perfectly," Patricia interrupted with a firmness that surprised her daughter. "You canceled my bank account, took away my driver's license, forbade me from seeing my friends, and now you wanted to lock me up in a nursing home. That's not care, that's control." Kimberly seemed genuinely shocked by her mother's assertiveness. For years, Patricia had been a submissive person who agreed with everything her daughter decided. Seeing her mother speak firmly and defend her rights was a new experience for her. "Mom, we just wanted to protect you." "Protect me from what, Kimberly?" "From living my own life. From making my own decisions." The conversation continued for hours. Gradually, it became clear that Kimberly and Jeffrey weren't malicious people like Ashley had been. They were concerned individuals who had started making decisions for their mother without realizing they were violating her autonomy. "We thought you were becoming too frail to take care of yourself," Kimberly admitted. "But you never asked how I felt about it," Patricia replied. "You just decided for me." Dr. William proposed an agreement. Patricia would regain full control over her finances and personal decisions. Kimberly and Jeffrey could continue offering support and care, but only when requested. And everyone committed to resolving future conflicts through dialogue, not control or manipulation. "What if our mother actually develops mental health issues in the future?" Jeffrey asked. "Then you seek proper medical help, with real professional evaluations, and include Patricia in all decisions about her care," answered Dr. Barbara, who had joined the meeting as a mediator. The agreement was signed by everyone involved. Patricia decided she wanted to live alone in a small apartment, but close to her daughter, so they could maintain a healthy relationship. 2 weeks later, Patricia was settled into a cozy apartment just a few blocks from Kimberly's home. For the first time in years, she had her own keys, her own bank account, and the freedom to come and go as she pleased. "Mrs. Dorothy," Patricia said during a visit, "I don't know how to thank you for everything you've done for me. You gave me my life back. Sweetheart, you were the one brave enough to leave and ask for help. I just offered support for something you had already decided to do." Patricia's case brought new reflections to Dorothy's work. She realized that not all cases of elder abuse involved malicious people. Often, well-meaning families crossed the line between care and control without realizing it. This inspired her to develop a new educational program called Caring Without Controlling, aimed at the families of older adults. The program taught how to offer support and protection without violating the autonomy and dignity of elderly family members. The difference between caring and controlling, Dorothy explained in the program's first lecture, is that caring involves the person in their own decisions, while controlling makes decisions for them. The program was a great success. Hundreds of families attended the workshops, learning how to set healthy boundaries and respect seniors' autonomy, while still providing care and protection. Kimberly and Jeffrey were among the first participants. During one workshop, Kimberly had an important realization. I realized I was treating my mother as if she were a child who needed constant supervision. But she's not a child. She's an experienced adult who deserves respect and independence. This reflection became one of the cornerstones of Dorothy's program. The tendency to infantilize older adults was one of the most common issues she encountered in her work. 6 months. After Patricia's case, Dorothy received another desperate call. This time it was from a 40-year-old man named Mark. "Mrs. Dorothy, my mother-in-law is being mistreated by my brother-in-law. He's stealing her pension and threatening to put her in a nursing home if she tells anyone. My wife is afraid to confront her brother, but I can't stand seeing this anymore. Where does your mother-in-law live, Mark?" "In Providence. Her son lives with her and controls everything. She can't even answer the phone by herself." "I'll be there tomorrow. Give me the address and any information you have." Dorothy had learned that cases of financial abuse against seniors were particularly urgent. Stolen money was often never recovered, leaving older adults in extreme vulnerability. The trip to Providence revealed a more complicated situation than Dorothy expected. Mrs. Margaret, 82 years old, lived with her 55-year-old son Daniel, who had lost his job 2 years earlier and had since relied entirely on his mother's pension. "He's not a bad person," Mark explained when they met, "but he's financially desperate and has started justifying to himself that he's entitled to his mother's money because he takes care of her." "And how is he treating her?" "At first it was fine, but as his financial situation worsened, he became more controlling and aggressive. Now she's afraid to ask for anything or complain." Dorothy decided to approach the situation differently. Instead of confronting Daniel directly, she introduced herself as a social worker, making routine visits to check on seniors' well-being in the area. The house where Margaret lived was small but well kept. Daniel answered the door with a mix of nervousness and hostility. "We didn't request any visit," he said when Dorothy introduced herself. "It's a routine visit, sir. We're checking on the well-being of all seniors in the area. May I speak with your mother?" "My mother isn't feeling very well today. She's resting." "I understand, but I need to speak with her personally to complete the report." Daniel hesitated, but eventually allowed Dorothy to enter. Margaret was sitting in the living room watching TV. When she saw Dorothy, her eyes lit up with a hope she couldn't hide. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Margaret. I'm Dorothy Wilson, a social worker. I came to see how you've been doing." "I'm fine," Margaret answered quickly, but her eyes said otherwise. Dorothy noticed several concerning signs. Margaret appeared undernourished, her clothes were worn, and there was an air of sadness and fear in her demeanor. "Do you leave the house regularly? Do you visit friends, go to church?" Margaret glanced nervously at Daniel before answering, "Not much. My son says it's dangerous for someone my age to go out alone." "What about your finances? Do you have control over your pension?" "My son handles that for me," Margaret replied, looking at Daniel again. Dorothy spent an hour in the home, asking seemingly routine questions while carefully observing the dynamic between mother and son. It was clear Margaret was being controlled and possibly mistreated, but also that Daniel wasn't a villain like Ashley had been. "Daniel," Dorothy said before leaving, "can I speak with you privately for a moment?" They stepped into the backyard out of Margaret's earshot. "Daniel, I've worked for years with cases of vulnerable seniors. I can see you care about your mother, but I can also see the current situation isn't working for either of you." Daniel became defensive. "I take very good care of my mother. She has everything she needs. I'm sure you're doing your best. But it seems to me you're both under a lot of stress. How about we talk about ways to improve things for both of you? Dorothy's non-confrontational approach surprised Daniel. He expected to be judged and attacked, not offered help. What do you have in mind? First, let's get you a job. Second, we'll set up a system where your mother keeps control of her finances, but you get the right support to care for her. Third, we'll connect you with services that can make life easier for both of you. Daniel began to cry. For 2 years, he had felt like he was drowning financially, and the pressure of caring for his mother without proper resources had become unbearable. I never wanted things to turn out like this, he admitted. At first, I only used a little of her money for emergencies, but then it got easier to keep using it, and before I knew it, I was completely dependent on her. And how does your mother feel about it? She never complains, but I can see she's sad. I know she'd like to have her own things, to be able to go out, to have more independence. Daniel, the fact that you recognize that shows you're not a bad person. You're someone in a tough situation who made the wrong choices, but we can fix this. Dorothy worked with Daniel and Margaret over the following weeks. She secured a job for Daniel at a local company, helped Margaret reopen her own bank account, and connected the family with home support services that made caregiving less stressful. The difference is incredible, Mark remarked a few weeks later. My mother-in-law is like a new person. She's happier, more active, and her relationship with Daniel has improved so much. This case taught Dorothy that not all elder abuse comes from bad intentions. Sometimes they came out of desperation, lack of resources, or not knowing about available alternatives. This inspired her to develop another program called Caregivers in Crisis, aimed at family members who were overwhelmed while caring for seniors. The program offered emotional support, practical resources, and guidance on how to care for someone without sacrificing their own mental health or the dignity of the person being cared for. During one of the first sessions of this program, a 50-year-old woman named Deborah made an emotional confession. I love my mother, but taking care of her has consumed my entire life. I lost my job, my marriage is in crisis, and sometimes I feel angry at her for being dependent on me. Then I feel guilty for feeling angry. Deborah, Dorothy replied gently, what you're feeling is normal. Caring for someone is hard work, and it's natural to feel overwhelmed. The important thing is to find ways to care for her without destroying yourself in the process. The Caregivers in Crisis program became so popular that Dorothy had to train other facilitators to meet the demand. Families from all over the region came seeking help for situations that seemed impossible to resolve. One of the most complicated cases involved a family where 3 siblings argued over who should care for their elderly father. Each believed they were doing more than the others, and their father felt like a burden being passed from one house to another. The solution isn't to divide the burden, Dorothy explained to the 3 siblings during a family mediation session. The solution is to include your father in decisions about his own life. But our father can't live alone, one of the children protested. Maybe he can't live completely alone, but that doesn't mean he can't have a say in where and how he wants to live. Working with the family, Dorothy helped them develop a plan where their father kept his own home, but received rotating support from his children. She also arranged home care services that made it possible for him to maintain independence while getting the care he needed. The difference is that now our father feels respected and included, one of the daughters remarked. Before, he felt like a problem to be solved. Dorothy's programs continued to grow and evolve. She developed workshops for healthcare, professionals on recognizing signs of elder abuse, created educational materials for families, and established a support network connecting vulnerable seniors with resources and protection. But perhaps her most ambitious project was the creation of Independence Home, an assisted living residence where seniors who had been victims of abuse could stay temporarily while rebuilding their lives. Independence Home was different from traditional nursing homes. It was specifically designed for seniors who needed to regain their confidence and independence after traumatic experiences. It offered private apartments, flexible support services, and an environment where residents had full control over their own lives. The idea is for it to be a place of healing and empowerment. Dorothy explained during the home's opening. Not a place where people come to die, but where they come to learn how to live again. The first resident of Independence Home was Mr. George, a 78-year-old man who had been financially abused by his own grandchildren. He arrived at the home with no money, no self-esteem, and afraid to trust anyone. "I thought my life was over," Mr. George said in an interview a few months later, "but here I learned I can start over at any age." Independence Home quickly filled with similar stories. Seniors who had lost everything discovered they could still build meaningful and independent lives. One of the most remarkable residents was Mrs. Eleanor, an 85-year-old woman who had been kept in private confinement by her daughter for over 5 years. When she arrived at the home, she could barely speak to others due to prolonged isolation. At first, Mrs. Eleanor would stay in her room all day, recalled Jennifer, who had become the home's coordinator. It took months for her to join group activities, but gradually, with patience and support, Mrs. Eleanor began to recover. She learned to use a computer, started painting, and eventually became one of the community leaders in the home. Mrs. Eleanor now helps new residents adjust, Jennifer shared. She's living proof that recovery is possible at any age. The success story of Independence Home gained national attention. Representatives from other states came to visit the project to learn how to replicate it in their own regions. The secret isn't just providing housing and care, Dorothy explained to a delegation of social workers from New York City. It's about creating an environment where seniors feel valued, respected, and in control of their own lives. During one of these visits, Dorothy met Dr. Lawrence, a geriatrician from New York Presbyterian Hospital, who was researching trauma recovery in seniors. "Mrs. Dorothy, the results you're achieving here are extraordinary," Dr. Lawrence said after spending a week observing the home's work. "I'd like to propose a partnership to scientifically document your methods." The collaboration with Dr. Lawrence resulted in the first scientific study on elder abuse recovery in the United States. The findings showed that seniors who went through Independence Home not only recovered physically and emotionally, but often developed higher levels of self-esteem and independence than they had before their traumatic experiences. It's as if surviving abuse, when properly supported, makes people stronger and more resilient, Dr. Lawrence explained during the presentation of the results. The study was published in international medical journals and established Dorothy as a global authority on trauma recovery in seniors. Invitations to speak at universities and organizations from various countries started pouring in. But Dorothy preferred to keep her focus local. She knew each community had its own unique needs, and that real change happened through individual work with families and people. "I can inspire people in other countries," she said when declining an invitation to speak in Europe. "But I can make a real difference here, working with people I can touch and hug." In 2010, 10 years after escaping Michael's home, Dorothy was invited to speak at the United States Senate about the need for stricter laws to protect seniors from family abuse. "Senators," she said, in her address, "we can no longer tolerate seniors being treated as property of their families. They are citizens with inalienable rights to dignity, autonomy, and respect." Her testimony was instrumental in passing a law that made it easier for seniors to report abuse and established harsher penalties for crimes against the elderly. "This law will save thousands of lives," commented the bill's sponsor, "and it exists because a courageous woman refused to accept the injustice she was suffering." That night, after the law was passed, Dorothy called Jennifer from her hotel in Washington, D.C. "Jennifer, we did it. The law passed." "Mrs. Dorothy, you made history today, not just for seniors in America, but for everyone who believes it's never too late to fight for justice." When Dorothy returned to Boston, she was welcomed as a hero. The airport was filled with people she had helped over the years. Patricia, Margaret, Mr. George, Mrs. Eleanor, and dozens of others were there to celebrate her victory. "Mrs. Dorothy," said Patricia during the small, impromptu ceremony at the airport, "you didn't just save our individual lives. You changed how our society treats its seniors, but perhaps the most emotional moment was when Ashley appeared in the crowd. She had continued working at Dorothy's organization, and become one of the most effective counselors for families in conflict situations. "Dorothy," said Ashley, using her name without Mrs. for the first time in years. "Thank you for giving me the chance to redeem myself. Working with you has been the most important experience of my life. Ashley, you proved that people can truly change. That's more valuable than any law we could pass." In the following years, Dorothy continued expanding her work. Independence Home became a model replicated in 12 US states. Her educational programs were adopted by universities and organizations across the country, and her personal story kept inspiring people not to accept injustice no matter their age. In 2015, at 80 years old, Dorothy decided it was time to pass the leadership of the organization to younger people. Jennifer took over as executive director, Michael became the financial director, and Rachel coordinated the educational programs. "I'm not retiring," Dorothy clarified during the leadership transition ceremony. "I'm just changing roles. Now I'll be the one who tells stories to remind everyone why we do this work." As the organization's official storyteller, Dorothy spent the next years traveling across the country, sharing her experience and inspiring new generations of senior rights activists. One of those trips took her back to New York City, to Harmony House, where she had stayed during her first days of freedom. Mrs. Ruth, now 90 years old, still ran the home. "Dorothy, my dear," Mrs. Ruth said when they met, "do you remember when you arrived here, scared and hopeless? How could I forget? You were one of the first people to show me I still had value and purpose. And look at everything you've built now. Hundreds of people freed from abuse, laws changed, a more aware society. It all started in that simple room where you first slept in safety." The visit to Harmony House made Dorothy reflect on the incredible journey she had taken, from an elderly woman fleeing in the middle of the night to a national leader in senior rights protection. That evening, staying in the same room she had occupied 15 years earlier, Dorothy wrote in her journal, "Today I've come full circle. I returned to the place where I learned it was possible to start over. The difference is, now I'm not just someone who started over. I'm someone who helped thousands of others start over too. If I could talk to the Dorothy of 15 years ago, crying in this same room, I'd say, 'Courage, dear. Your life isn't over yet. In fact, it's about to become more meaningful than you ever imagined.'" In 2018, Dorothy was diagnosed with cancer. Doctors said that with treatment she could still live many good years, but Dorothy decided to use her illness as another opportunity to teach and inspire. "I'll face this disease the same way I faced Ashley," she told Michael and Jennifer when sharing the diagnosis, "with courage, determination, and surrounded by the people I love." During her chemotherapy treatment, Dorothy kept working. She gave speeches by video call when she couldn't travel, welcomed visitors who wanted to meet her, and wrote a book about her experience. The book, titled "It's Never Too Late to Start Again, A Journey from Abuse to Freedom," became a national bestseller. The royalties were donated entirely to Expand Independence Home. "This book isn't about me," Dorothy said during the launch. "It's about all seniors who refuse to accept injustice and all the people who choose to help them. It's a book about the strength inside each of us, no matter our age." One of the most touching reviews came from Kimberly, the daughter of Patricia. "This book changed my understanding of what it means to care for someone. Mrs. Dorothy taught me that true love doesn't control, it sets free. Thanks to her, my mother and I now have a relationship based on mutual respect instead of forced dependence." In 2020, during the COVID-19 pandemic, Dorothy became an important voice in protecting seniors from forced isolation. She worked to ensure health safety measures weren't used as excuses to violate seniors' autonomy rights. "Protecting seniors from illness is important," she said in a televised interview that gained national attention. "But we can't use protection as an excuse to treat them like children, incapable of making decisions about their own lives." Her statements helped establish protocols that balanced health safety with respect for seniors' autonomy during the pandemic. In 2021, at 86, Dorothy announced she had completely beaten cancer. To celebrate, she threw a big party at Independence Home. bringing together hundreds of people whose lives she had touched over the years. "This party isn't just to celebrate my recovery," she said during the event. "It's to celebrate proof that we can face any challenge when we have support, love, and the determination not to give up." The party lasted 3 days and featured moving testimonies from people of all ages. Patricia, now 88, spoke about how Dorothy had taught her it's never too late to be brave. Daniel, the son who had financially abused his mother, talked about how Dorothy's program had saved his family and taught him the difference between caring and controlling. But perhaps the most touching testimony came from an 8-year-old girl named Emma, the granddaughter of one of Independence Home's residents. "Grandma always says, Mrs. Dorothy taught her that age is just a number and that we can always do important things. Because of Mrs. Dorothy, my grandma started dreaming again, and now I know that when I get old, I'll be able to dream too." In her later years, Dorothy focused on mentoring young professionals working in senior advocacy. She established a scholarship program for social workers, created a specialized library on senior rights, and remained an inspiring presence at events and conferences. One of her last major public appearances was in 2023 at 88, when she was honored with the title of Honorary Citizen of Boston. "This city welcomed me when I was a refugee fleeing my own family," she said in her acceptance speech, "and it gave me the chance to turn my pain into a force for good. Boston isn't just where I live, it's where I was reborn." That night, after the ceremony, Dorothy was at home with Michael, Rachel, Jennifer, and her grandchildren when she reflected on her life. "You know, if someone had told me 25 years ago that I'd become a national activist, change laws, and help thousands of people, I would have thought it impossible. But I've learned that our hardest experiences often become our greatest source of strength." "Mom," Michael said, "do you think it was all worth it? All the suffering she endured with Ashley, all the battles she had to fight?" Dorothy thought for a long moment before answering, "I won't say it was worth it because that would downplay the real pain I felt, but I will say that I managed to turn that terrible experience into something beautiful and meaningful, and that's more than many people can do with their pain." "And what's your message for people going through similar situations now?" "My message is simple. Never accept being treated as less than you deserve. Age is no reason to lose dignity, autonomy, or rights. And always remember, no matter how dark the situation may seem, there are always people willing to help those brave enough to ask for it." Jennifer, who had become like a daughter to Dorothy, asked the final question, "Mrs. Dorothy, if you could speak to the woman who fled her home that early morning 25 years ago, what would you say to her?" Dorothy smiled with that wise smile she had earned through years of experience and resilience. "I'd say, courage, my dear. You're about to discover what you're capable of. This escape isn't an end, it's a beginning. And what an extraordinary beginning it will be." Bati Dorothy Wilson passed away peacefully in 2024 at the age of 89 in her home in Boston, surrounded by the family she had chosen along her journey. Her passing was mourned nationally, but her legacy lived on through the thousands of lives she had touched. On the day of her funeral, Independence Home was filled with people who had been saved by her work. Ashley was there, now a respected counselor helping families resolve conflicts without violence. Patricia was there, still independent at 93. Hundreds of other seniors who had regained their dignity through Dorothy's work came to pay their final respects. But perhaps the most touching tribute was the unanimous decision to turn the date of her escape from her son's home, March 15th, into National Senior Autonomy Day, a day dedicated to remembering that age is never a reason to lose rights or dignity. End of story. Now tell us what you thought of Dorothy Wilson's story. Where are you following us from? And what touched your heart most in this journey of courage and transformation? Do you think Dorothy made the right decisions throughout her life? Share your thoughts on how we can better protect seniors in our own families and communities. We'd love to hear your honest words and your own experiences. Thank you so much for joining us in this moving story.